I didn't want the listeners to feel like we scripted this whole thing. I want to make this feel real and raw. I don't have prepared. I have my notes. I got my notebook, but I don't have it like scripted in front of me. I have an agenda. I want to hit all these items because I think it would hit a little bit differently if to a listener, if you were just listening to us just chit chat and banter and rant and going down huge rabbit holes about the goal. But we will try to keep some amount of time. So the goal for today is to get to 19. The tipping point, chapter 15 is a tipping point. It's the Herbie hike. And I wanted to just back up a little bit because we hit it, I think. Like we hit it and we took it to a level where I don't know if I've ever heard or read in forums or whatever about the goal that Alex had to swallow some ego. So did Herbie. And oftentimes that's the hardest thing to do. Both if you're in a position of leadership, you have to admit that your way is
not working.
Even working. And whatever you're trying to do, whatever you try to do will be wrong because all of your assumptions are wrong.
Oh, yeah. Thomas and I are back at it again with Calabosession number 4. And it's kind of like our really good friend, Mr. Davis Hambrick said. The entire conversation is framed around the goal. And then we just kind of keep veering off and getting into deeper subjects, like super deep, highly intellectual subjects like booger flicking. I know it sounds goofy, but there is a serious tone to the whole idea. You're going to have to listen to catch that one. We also jump into constraint management, and Thomas shares some really simple but important techniques to like make sure they get handled and removed before they impact the flow of work. And he also brings up like a list of ambush techniques that I'm going to say weak managers, which I used to be and still am sometimes, tend to deploy on their people with like a cheat code list of how to respond when you're being ambushed by your manager or those managers that deploy those types of techniques. So there's actually another one of those where you should get your notepad out and maybe make some mental notes or write them down because he's dropping knowledge, man. That dude's got it going on. And it's like a little scary because we're getting close to the end, meaning there's 2 or 3 more episodes to come if I can ever like buckle down and get it done. And because I have become the bottleneck on releasing these collabo sessions, and with the help of the patrons, thank you all patrons for being with us and sticking with us for so long. We have added a team member, Miss Areli, who I don't know if y'all have noticed. If you haven't gone to the Learnings and Missteps TikTok, you'll see I've been pushing out tons of content, and that's because she's been helping me chop up the clips. Like she's making the total selection, so that's taken some work. And we just ran an experiment with this episode where she did all of the editing, and I am extremely pleased with the product. And again, the funds that people contribute to the Patreon account through the website help pay for stuff like this. And also December's upon us, so we'll be making a distribution to Skilled Trades Alliance for 80% of what we've gotten from y'all's contribution. So appreciate y'all very much. And also want to give y'all a little teaser. It's the day after Thanksgiving. I have on my board to release the Lean in Love reflection journal. So it's going to be like a 30-day journal. Of course, I've got some work to do it. The famous lady, Jennifer Lacey, has already produced a fabulous piece of art, doodle art, that's going to be on the cover. But keep an eye out because that's coming out in December, just in time for the Christmas gifts. Back to the conversation on the goal.
They're not based on anything scientific or fact. They're based upon your own emotions in that moment. Yes. Again, when you go 10 minutes later and you look back, it'll be crystal clear, but it doesn't matter because that's 10 minutes later and you have a whole brand new situation. So when we're going to talk about bottlenecks, bottlenecks are not necessarily bad, nor are they necessarily good. They just are. They're just a current state. And once you accept that you have bottlenecks, you can start to exploit them. And you see that here in this example in chapter 15 with Herbie. So he's overloaded and he's getting tired. So whatever Herbie tries to do by himself just makes it completely worse. and it slows everybody down. And oftentimes what we try to do in construction is if we find the slowest trade, I guess you've been in general contractor long enough. What's the almost like knee-jerk reaction once you find someone that's working slower than agreed upon?
Double them up, right? Like they need more manpower, they need more material, we're going to supplement labor, you got to work overtime.
Right?
Like,
gonna punish them. I've written in my day letters, nasty letters with certified and signatures, and made sure they were delivered. Like there's legal ramifications for doing this, and we have to do that. This is just the world. It's like neither delay letters are neither good nor bad. They just are.
They're part of the system,
right?
Yep.
But we shouldn't weaponize them as a first attack. That should be when every other thing that we've decided has failed, including third-party arbitration. Like we get a third party, then we take steps to supplement labor. And there's other production laws that will teach you that won't even help.
That's the worst.
Make it worse.
It's gonna make it worse. Well, you know what's interesting? I understand the value of the letters and the contract language and the different gateways that you go through to, protect yourself against liability or risk. What confuses me, or what I've always found entertaining, is when me as a trade uses the same system. And all of a sudden, I'm not a trade partner because I'm submitting letters, I'm using language like delay, and people get super, super defensive all of us. It's like, well, wait a minute. Last time you did this to me, you said it was just business. Like, it's not a big deal. What happened to just business? This is just part of the system, the part of the process. But I understand, right? Like, it gets people, you read the language, and it's intimidating language. And it's intimidating by design.
Like our long form contract that if you want to work with the company I work for, it's pretty scary. There's a lot of risk shedding there. And oftentimes my thing is like, okay, sign that, throw that in the folder, never even look at that again. The only people that have to look at that, besides the little scope portion, are none of us. None of us need to even look about that, because those will be people who are $450 an hour and they wear suits and fancy shoes to the job site and not understand why that's a bad idea. They're not one of us. And they're great people, and we need attorneys, people in the justice, but not when we're trying to settle a production issue on a job site. Let's be real here. So back to the book. I just wanted to say that thank you for showing some vulnerability, because we were talking about being men and being courageous and strong and independent and assertive. Those are known, studied psychology of being masculine. And Alex Rogo finally starts to become a leader at this moment on this hike. What he does, he says, he doesn't accept that Herbie doesn't want to open his rucksack and remove all this heavy stuff that's burdening him down. But he's like, no, Herbie, it's too bad. You have to, for the better of this group. And everybody here, you have to pick up the slack so we all can move forward as a team. That's so important at that moment. And they're very small moments. And you would think, oh, what's the big deal? It's like this group of children doing a hike. This was his tipping point to start to change the way his mindset worked when dealing with delays at work. He swallows his pride and says, Herbie, I was wrong this entire time. We just proved it by doing this silly simulation that we got to find a bottleneck, and you're the bottleneck. You have to admit that. So you have to admit that Herbie is the slowest, but also understand that Herbie is a crucial part of the troop's goal, right? Like you have to accept both. When we accept both, we can accept the current condition. Like you can literally see. And there's a lot of bias, and I'm full of it. But I have trouble when I'm in that moment. If I'm so like stubborn, stuck in my ways, I literally can't see things, even if it's right in front of my face. Didn't notice where the bottleneck until I finally accepted it. And once you accept it, then it's like, oh my God, I can see it. And then it grows and it builds upon itself. And then Alex, the leader, he puts Herbie in the front along and makes a statement. The idea is to get there together. We're not a bunch of individuals, we're a team, and the team doesn't arrive at camp until all of us arrive at camp. So anyways, we'll go back to the book. And they get to the campground late and they're setting up the dark. It presents an increasingly dangerous situation. So not only are they in a psychological battle with themselves about like egos. They're also in actual danger. So he asks open and honest questions. He goes, "Hey, Herbie, what do you got in your pack? What you got, man?" 6-pack of soda, spaghetti, candy bars, jar of pickles, couple cans of tuna fish, a raincoat, rubber boots, bag of tent stakes, large iron skillet, and a collapsible steel shovel. This guy was ready. He's ready.
He was.
He's ready to be entrenched. And Herbie resists the help. He says, "I can carry it." And 3, make a plan. Once you've accepted it, right? You have to make a plan. And it says, make a plan to help Herbie go faster. And Alex says, "If we take some of the load off you, you'll be able to do a better job at the front of the line." Herbie finally seems to understand. And then 3, take action. The kids, they split up the carrying load. And it's like, no factor. We got you, Herbie. We got you. Because they understand the situation too. And they remove the stuff in his bag. They split the stuff up. They share the load. And then they get it back going down the trail. Suddenly they go faster. And the lesson we learn there, the slowest operation in terms of theory of constraints, that is, the lesson here is the slowest operation is the constraint. Because if we have dependent events, you don't have to look far. You just have to look for the slowest. And whoever's the slowest, that's the constraint. And if the constraint is stop the line, that's the worst kind. If it's not slopping the line, but it's slowing it down and slowing it more than the demand that you want it to be, like, hey, we need to get to the end. We got a production rate that we got to meet. If we don't get there, we're going to be in the dark, and that's dangerous. We don't want to do this. So Dr. Goldratt, in the hike, he teaches dependent events and statistical fluctuations because all of the events depend on the constraint. Everything is dependent upon the constraint. Herbie doesn't make it, but we don't meet the goal.
Right.
So each event has an expected value, but all of those expected values fluctuate because of slight variations, right? Somebody speeds up, and especially for Herbie, because Herbie's the constraint. So any fluctuation in Herbie, if he gasses out and falls down,
everybody's
whole
done.
line stops, right? So you'll have slight fluctuations that might change inventory or might change your operating expense. But if your constraint slows down, it's the worst because everything slows down. And even if the kids pass Herbie, we do this all the time. Look around him, and we'll go back and get Herbie. Be like, "Herbie, sit down. We're going to take your bag, and you rest here, and we're going to come back and get you when we're done." Like, that's terrible. Don't do that with children. That's super dangerous. So we can't go around Herbie. We got to face facts. So the constraint is the slowest task or individual step in the process. If that step is the slowest, that is the constraint. You got to label that thing and put red flags and shoot lasers at it. And if you are the constraint, it's super scary because it's like, oh man, I'm the loser here. So you also have to highlight it and then also support it, that if it's a person or if it's a person's responsibility, you got to be like, it's okay. We're going to help you. If you don't do that, that leads to bad things, or fire the person. That doesn't help you. What helps the person and helps the whole situation is helping that constraint. All the other tasks are directly dependent on the constraint ahead of them. So if you think of me in the self-checkout line, is in front of me with complicated order and they're doing a price check, and then they bought alcohol, so they got to check their ID, and then they're going to write it with a check. Or get off a damn airplane. The person who put their bag 4 rows behind, and who's trying, just wait till those 4 rows go by you and then go back and get it. Don't try to be a salmon and go. So anyways, so we need to support them and teach. But often this also happens in construction. Let me just bring it back a little bit. We use historical data in construction, right? Or we use a set of logical rules that is fixed. 5-day concrete cycle. What's this high rise right here? It's 5-dayer. 5-dayer, right? Tape and finish drywall. It could be 10 square feet. It could be 10,000 square feet. It's going to take 7 days. HVAC roughing from floors 2 to 10. Do we ever use historical data or rules?
Yes. So the historical data / rules that I used to plan off was pounds per hour, because we knew the poundage of the sheet metal that we were installing, a combination of medium pressure, low pressure, and it spat out like, okay, this is what we perform at. This is what our history tells us that we've been able to accomplish. And we would build that. That's how we would build our schedule. And so then it's a simple question of, that helped me to have the negotiation with the GC of, hey, you need to be done in 3 days. Like, okay, in order for me to do that, I'm going to need all of my sheet metal here, and I'm going to need 15 people on the floor to be able to accomplish that. Well, why do you need that? Because this is our install rate. Well, we can't do that. Nobody else is going to be able to work. It's like, I agree. So can we do 9 days? Can we phase this out to where I get out of the chase, get my medium pressure in concurrent with the framers, but all those other little damn wing walls all over the place, leave them down and let me get ahead a day or two, and then they can come back and do whatever they got to do. Like, we can do that.
What the hike teaches us is when we're in the production time, we cannot rely on historical data. There is a time and a place for historical data.
Correct.
I get it. When we're facing constraints and we're in real situations, the thing we should double down on is not, hey, what does RS means have to say about production rate for electricians running 3/4 and 1 inch conduit? Like, no, throw that book, put that back on the shelf. Don't throw it away.
Different situation.
It's a useful book. Go base it upon what you see in front of your face, people moving around. And if you see an electrician that has to go in and out these little meeting rooms on a lift, because you can't use ladders, you got to go in and out on the lift, in and out on the lift. It takes longer. Is it better? Is it more ergonomic and is more safe? Absolutely. But it takes longer to do that maneuver. The only way to understand that is to actually go out and see and stand in that situation and
study it.
And then take your assumption that your RS means book or your historical data or the 5-day concrete cycle that we all bought in the contract. I get it. Set that aside and take current reality and go find Herbie. Find your constraint, and it won't take long because all you have to do, look for the slowest operation, the one that's completing at a rate that is slower than the rest. And oftentimes it tells itself because people are upset. Not only are the people behind it, like me in the checkout line, like, I'm upset. Why is constraint in front of me? Ugh, I feel confined. Or I'm on an airplane, I am confined, and I can't leave because there's a process in front of me. So oftentimes you don't even have to look. People will tell you.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. They'll tell you. If you listen, they'll tell you.
You have to ask them. You just look at their eyes. And then the people who are the Herbies of the world, you can see fatigue in their faces or stress.
Yes. They're demoralized. There's a couple things that have popped in my head, in terms of historical data, because I've had this argument too many times. The GC would be telling me exactly how many plumbers I needed, how many pipe fitters I needed, how many sheet metal guys I needed. And I'm like, I disagree. Where are you getting this? Like, what are you talking about? I didn't understand. But over and over, I started kind of paying attention. They had their own personal historic data, right? They had their little pocket notepad that over the years, they got this many square feet, and it took this many plumbers to do that. And it took this many sheet metal workers to do that. And so they were basing it on another outfit's performance. And at the time, the company I was with, we pre-assembled as much as we possibly could before we hit the job. So that was the reason I was not going to have this large volume of people. And I used to fight it all the time. Like, what do you mean you only have 4 plumbers? I'm like, bro, we got a layout. We're going to install hangers. My prefab's showing up next Tuesday. Like, I got plumbers working on it right now. You just can't see them. And it was a constant battle. So that's one point on the historic data. And finally, I'm like, look, we're just going to have to be mad at each other. Like, by next Friday, if you don't feel better, then call my office. But I'm not changing anything to make you feel better.
That's incredibly profound. And people who are listening, we don't ever double down on historical data, or even if it's in a tact plan, if you find a constraint, don't force it. Because it's like, hey, you have to be here and you also have to be in this zone because you're holding this tact train. No, you have to focus on the Herbie. And the beautiful thing about tact, it'll almost instantly tell you when you have a Herbie. That's the beauty of it. So those who are into tact or are curious, the beauty of even last plan, it'll tell you, it'll find Herbie and it'll tell you what Herbie is within whatever you close the cycle. So if you're doing last planner, it's at least every 5 days. And if you're doing tact, it could be twice a day.
Yes.
As often as twice a day.
Yes.
As often as twice a day, if you're super diligent. And then the closer you are to Herbie showing up and Herbie getting dealt with, like us removing all the crap out of Herbie's backpack, the closer in time that we can do that, that's how you recover quickly. That's being agile. Like, I think I just covered like 6 books in a row there.
Yeah.
Super easy to say. It's super hard to do what I'm trying to say. So what do you think about that?
I think so. There's a really important point there. You talked about these different planning, production management systems. And I used to have this thinking, and then I kind of like, oh no, I was thinking about it backwards. These systems are perfectly designed to surface problems, right? Think about when you're having a pull plan and people are saying, man, I could do that, but I need this. Like, we don't have that agreement or submittal or whatever constraint, right? That goes on the constraint board. Like, let's make sure, get a plan to, let's push that skillet somewhere. Somebody's got to carry that skillet. Y'all need to go do that. Now, what people do though, is because all of these constraints are surfacing, all of these problems are coming out in these engagements, their response is to feel like the meeting or the session was a failure because all anybody did was complain. It's like, no, they didn't complain. They're surfacing problems early. And now we can do something about those, because normally those problems don't come up until we're on the hike. We're finding out now before the damn hike. And so again, to your point, these things will surface problems, but for people that are maybe new to them, their natural instinct is like, man, this was a waste of time. All we heard was a bunch of complaints and excuses. Like, no, you got a bunch of gifts today. That's what you got.
That was the entire point. I mean, there's a benefit that, hey, we figured out sequence A through D, right? That's really effective. But the gold, the whole reason, the entire reason we did it is surface all those issues. Then all of a sudden, now we got a cheat sheet. Not only do we have at least the best plan of all that experience in that room, 2, we also have all of the issues from the experts who know the issue, like aren't doing this for the first time, or who aren't being challenged in a leadership position. Like, these are people who've done this for 20 plus years. They know all the tricks. They surface these issues, and then it's like, oh my God, we can go do something about this stuff. Everything that goes on that constraint log goes into the plan. So it's like, how do I put the pull plan into P6? Well, you just take what's ever written on the card and add a line in P6, link it together with the logic that's written on the board. Step 1. Step 2, if there's also an issue that's linked to that activity, make that another activity and call it constraint. If you don't want to put it into your schedule, put it into some kind of a worksheet or a whiteboard that you'll look at every single day. Not when you print the notes for the OAC meeting or when you have to scramble and get everything into the monthly report. For the people like me, don't do that. I already know the issues because I went and I looked at either your whiteboard or if you have some kind of constraint log in your folders, I've already read it. And that way, when I show up, I respect your time. You don't have to teach me all your issues. I'm more or less aware of those. And now it's like, hey, instead of me discovering all these new issues that are new to me, just start working on them and then I'll give you some advice on how to solve them. That's literally how you'd be an operational manager. So we learned that from Herbie. We learned that from Alex. And he's like sitting on some juice. Ooh, I got it. He's all excited. And then he goes home. And then it's like chapter 16. And his wife is gone. A sealed letter from Julie, by the way. I've never gotten a sealed handwritten. I've gotten a couple emails and many texts and a couple phone calls. But you gotta be angry to put pen and paper, fold it very nicely, and put it into an envelope, seal it, and write Alex, boom, leave it on the kitchen table, and you pack your stuff and you're gone. The note reads, Al, not even fully Alex, just Al. I can't handle always being last in line for you. I need more of you, and it's clear now that you won't change. I'm going away for a while. Need to think things over. Sorry to do this to you. I know you're busy. Yours truly, Julie. You've already shared this, but you received a similar letter.
Yeah, similar. I mean, the letters were handwritten. Man, you know what? I wonder if I still have the handwritten. I got pictures of it. Anyways, I received the letters. There was a different tone. I mean, part of it was like, you're jacked up, bro. We need to work on this. But the point was, can we use this to work on our relationship? Not like I'm out, just like, hey, I want this to work. So can we work on this together? And I'll tell you, in that moment, it was an intensely emotional experience, because for so many reasons, like one, she was calling me out. Two, it was very factual because, the stuff was real and it was on paper. And just the fact that she took the time and energy to contextualize 5S and apply it to our personal relationship, like she was trying to connect with me. That meant a lot. And then as I'm reading, I'm like, oh my God, this can be valuable for so many people. There was a lot going on at that time. And, this part of the book is the part that shocked me, right, of the goal.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, because, I'm having a good time reading about Herbie and all the other stuff.
Oh.
And then they bring the home life in, right? Like the home personal relationship. And when I read whenever it was 5-8 years ago, I'm like, oh no, let's not do this. Like, what does that matter? That's different. Well, here we are now. We're live streaming every other Saturday, Jen and I, and that's all we're talking about is relationships, because I'm a different person. I live a different life, and I'm experiencing a greater quality of life because now I understand that it's the same. Like, it's not separate. It's all one thing. And anyways, the goal in this section is just like, oh man, there's some conviction for me. And thinking of the ladies that I've been with, and they were second. 100, and they weren't even second sometimes. Sometimes they were fourth or fifth in terms of priority. So, it just reminds me of my short-sightedness on that realm.
A lot of the people that read the goal and comment, they talk about the chapter 16 as a throwaway chapter. It's not.
Negative. It's not.
It's proof that there is no balance in work and life or a membrane. If you have inefficiencies in your own personal life at work, it flows into home.
Yes.
Sorry. And if you don't use your words and hold it in, doesn't matter. It comes out in your energy.
Mm-hmm.
Either in bad moods, it comes out in your words, it comes out in your bodily movements, it comes out in your physical location. You'll go hide. You have to cope with that stress. It's impossible not to cope with that stress. And this proves it, that this is a rough time in Alex Rogo's life. It's a fictional character, and I get it, but it's real.
Yeah. It's
very real. And work problems, if you're not efficient at work and your team is unhappy and there's a whole bunch of stress, all of that spills right over into your home life. And not only does it spill into your home life, everybody that's also working in that situation, it goes and spills into theirs. And we talk a lot about mental health and in construction. And it's like, we really need to do something about this. Seems to be a problem. Yeah, it is. How do we do that? It's fixing flow. My company works with Nicholas Modig. Dude, Nicholas, hopefully he hears these words, because his book, the goal kind of was like shifted me into like, I'm now a lean maniac. I can't consume enough now. That was like the one where it was like, oh, damn, this has world-changing impacts. And I just have a little note here. It says flow efficiency fulfills needs. That's it. You're fulfilling needs. So if you have high flow efficiency and you have a poor home life, or you have issues at home, you're not being efficient.
Right.
You still have some process improvement to work on. And the same with if your home life is awesome and you got an amazing family and they're extended and they're so happy and blah, 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 and you're an ass at work, same thing. So when we talked to Nicholas, and his whole thing is like fix flow, fix the world. All of these little waiting moments and constraints and issues, like once you start to loosen those, don't just stop with the ones at home, or don't just stop with the ones at work, because you're only, and Dr. Goldratt says the same thing, you're only locally optimized.
Right.
You got to keep going. Your Herbie, you might fix the Herbie, and we're going to get to chapter 18, but you might fix the Herbie at work and be so happy about it. But if we got issues at home that we're not dealing with my wife, beautiful wife, Julie, and my children, we're not meeting the goal, because we're still having unintended outcomes of that. I think chapter 17, even though it's super short, it plays the reality.
I was one of those people that said, like, why is that even in the book? That's stupid. But again, accounting for the entire system, what it reminds me of is addiction. right? Like I'm so addicted to work or the dopamine hits that I get from the interactions of work that I put more energy into that. And it's the same with my self-medicating, alcohol, like all the stuff that I used. I put so much energy into it. The first, like usually the very first signal that I'm off the rails again is other parts of my life are unmanageable, are becoming like the yard, easy one. The grass and the weeds are now 3 feet high, but everything's good. But no, everything's not good because I'm putting all this time and energy in one part of my life. Sometimes it was productive stuff, sometimes it was not productive stuff, but in every case, it was addiction. And the first sign is some important part of my life is falling apart. And so for me, like I did dismiss it originally, but now, coming to where I'm at now, it's like, no. It's a perfectly suited point of the story in terms of thinking big, like full circle, right? I've been wrestling with this idea around balance because in my head, I see scale and balance means they're evenly balanced. So in Jesse land, that means I spend 8 hours working, I spend 8 hours exercising, I spend 8 hours sleeping, I spend 8 hours with family, and there's not enough hours to do that. And I know that there's no way I'm going to do that. It just doesn't even make sense to me. But maybe it's a matter of intensity. So this is where I'm at now, is like it's a question of intensity. Do I give all the other important things in my life the same measure of intensity that I do my work? And if I do that, I mean, that's the experiment right now. When I spend time with my mom or my friends or whatever, and I give them the same measure of intensity, it's a more fruitful experience. So it's not balance, it's intensity, which is also a far cry from half measures or neglect. Anyhow, that's where this whole situation, that's what it's ringing in my head.
Yeah, you got to find Herbie in whatever situation and then take the load off it. And then what's going to happen?
Another Herbie.
That's powerful stuff there. But it doesn't get any better for Alex either, by the way.
No.
Go to chapter 17. It's a Monday because weekend's over, bro.
Oh, reality.
And Monday morning is a disaster. It starts with Davey trying to make breakfast for himself, which is a nice, responsible thing to do. So when he's in the shower, his children are trying to make pancakes. So one gets the pan too hot, Davey, and then scorches it, and then he freaks out because there's smoke going. And the two children are fighting in the kitchen, and they make this huge mess. Huge mess. His daughter, Sharon's just trying to help and only makes it worse. She grabs a pan and flails it, and then you got burnt batter and all kinds of stuff. Everything gets ruined. And then it's like, hey, it's time to go. And then Sharon, she feigns illness and she gets sick. It's like, oh, you can't be sick because I got this big thing at work and your mom's not home. Like, we can't have this. And he has to sit her down, have that conversation. Because in the moment, you got to bring the situation. If it's a 9, you got to dial it back. And the only way to dial it back is to put space in between that issue and the person. So they go to the bedroom and they have a calm conversation. And he explains, I got this situation. I have to go to work. You have to go to school. So they make an agreement. And Sharon says, okay, I'll go to school. But by the time he gets both the kids to school and drives his butt to work, it's past 9 o'clock. That's when you walk in and be like, good afternoon. You just own it. And as he walks in, because he's late, his assistant has a message slip because this is the 80s. So if you called and no one was there, you had to leave a message and you get handed to you as a written from Hilton Smythe, marked urgent and double underlined. So he's got to call Hilton. Oh, I guess he's the COO. He says, well, it's about time I tried to reach you an hour ago. Because when you do that and you put someone in a box like that, you're immediately like on the defense. And we already talked about this earlier, but this is that ambush management style. It's one of the worst things you can do to your employees. Ambush them. I hate that. And it's favored by those who fear direct I'm pausing for dramatic effects. If you fear direct conflict, you use this method because it's so effective. It's like, hey, if I have to have an uncomfortable conversation with somebody about an issue and we're going to have a chat that's not going to be comfortable, they shield themselves with ambush, because it immediately, you don't have a chance to recover yourself. You're like, damn, and then you just do the pile on. So I wrote down some of these ambushes that we weave into our corporate messaging. I'm guilty of all of them. That's how I know these are super effective. So number one, sending out bad news in a mass email as a first strike. Mass email, layoffs. That's a super uncomfortable conversation. I'm just going to do it in a mass email and copy the world on it. Two, if you're less tech savvy and you want to do this in person, you get a bunch of people in a group and you deliver bad news in a group setting and then escape, right?
Yeah. And it's like the bad news is for one person, but I'm going to tell everybody.
This is where people get uncomfortable in one-on-one situations because it's dealing with people's livelihoods. So we're going to get a group of them together and we're going to say, hey, the situation is bad, blah, blah, blah. We're going to make cuts to the accounting department, and then I'm going to shoot right out this door and ask this person if you have any questions. That's so bad. Oh, so bad. Using the element of surprise to make reassignments and coerced acknowledgments, right? Be like, hey, you need to go to this other project now. I'm going to use that element of surprise instead of having an uncomfortable conversation about showing up on time or commitment or whatever. I'm just going to be like, you're not my problem anymore. Go away. And I'm not going to tell you ahead of time. I'm just going to blast it on you and say, pack up your stuff and get out of here. Now you're somebody else's problem, making those things. Or worse, this coerced acknowledgement where it's like, hey, you need to go to this other project. And by the way, you need to sign this piece of paper that's backdated so I can be free and clear from HR. So my butt's covered for the process. Oh,
negative.
All of those are just ambushes. If you are a leader and you do this, just stop it. So do you have another ambush style?
I don't know that I have another ambush style, but the two that bug me the most is the group ass chewing when it's one or two people. And everybody knows it's the one or two people. Well, I do have another ambush. It's like totally disrespectful, and I respect you less if that's what you're doing.
Oh, yeah. 100%.
Like, right? Like, come on, man. We all know what the deal is. Why are you scared? What are you scared of? It's the conflict. Yep. The other one is sending people, like, I call it booger flicking. Like, this person's a problem here. I'm going to flip my booger to somebody else instead of having the conversation. I have experience with one young man, 3-year apprentice. And he bounced around from job to job to job. He finally ended up on my crew, and he was nowhere near where he should have been in terms of skill and knowledge. And so I talked to him like, bro, what have you been? I know you're a 30-year apprentice. You don't know how to do this? And he's like, well, nobody's ever showed me. I'm like, okay, well, let me show you. And so he had a lot of problems, like just a lot of problems. And I finally sat him down. I said, look, bro, like, I'm going to be patient with you, but I need more from you. And here are the things that, like, you ain't even got the tools you're supposed to have. So you're going to have these tools, blah, blah, blah. And he seemed like shocked, like, what do you, like, offended? And I said, dude, why do you think you get passed around from job to job to job to job? And his response was, because everybody wants me on their job. And I was like, oh my God, like, he really believed that. And I said, no, they pass. It's because they're happy to get rid of you first. Like, got teary-eyed and everything. I'm like, look, bro, I'm sorry to bring this truth to you, but that's my job to let you know. And I got you. I can help you, but you really got to pick it up. I'm going to be patient. And it helped, right? All of a sudden, he's like, man, thank you. Nobody ever told me that. But 3 years, like, you're underserving that person, that human being's career by flicking the damn booger and being a chicken and not having the performance conversation. So the other ambush that I will exploit it is, hey, they said this came from upstairs. This came from the main, right? Like, it's not me. It's not me. It's them. Like, real story.
The pass through.
Yeah. And, you know, the worst thing about that, again, is you abdicate your authority and your responsibility, or rather, if I do that, I'm abdicating my authority and responsibility to them, whoever them is. And so I had a situation where my boss was writing me up like a corrective action thing for, I don't even remember what it was. And I earned it. Like, it wasn't wrong. Like, pissed off HR. I argued with a bunch of people. I got really emotional. about a situation. So I was getting written up for that. But what he said is, hey, man, I got to write you up. This is coming from above. And this is what they think. And my immediate response was like, okay, well, why am I talking to you? I think I should hear this from them. What he wanted to do, all he wanted was a signature. He didn't want to have the conversation. And so, of course, I pressed. I'm like, okay, like if it's from them, I'm kind of feeling like you don't agree with this write-up. And so if you don't agree, why are you bringing it to me? He's like, no, I agree. Like, oh, okay, well, let's talk about that. Well, we just really need to, it's just a formality. And of course, I lost total respect for that person after that. But it was one of those like hidden ambushes. You're trying to be my friend and you're sticking the knife in my ribs.
Yeah,
like,
that's
come
the
on,
most
man.
effective ambush is one you don't even see coming. Name droppers don't do that because you'll get caught.
Yes.
Because how do I know? I call the name. Drop the name. I ain't scared to call the name, right? I got number 2, bro. And then I'll call and find out that you're a liar. Oh. Right? And then it's even a worse situation. Because, what do we, like, we can't even repair that. Like, at the end,
it's done.
It's just done. There's only one way out, and that's to move on. And I have a letter. I've also deserved a performance improvement plan letter. And I got the damn thing. I still got it. I'm glad that they did that because, hey, you know what? Here's a list of the things that you need to work on. Got it.
Yep.
100%. I'll go work on these items. And so those performance things. But if you have a real conversation about that, and it's truthful and it's honest and open, it's like, hey, we have this opportunity, blah, blah, blah. Doors will open for you. One, if you're a leader and you do that, you're not a leader. You're a tyrant. You're not effective at all. 2, if you're the victim of an ambush, I have some tips.
Ooh.
The first thing is check your ego, because it's like, I'm being assaulted verbally or worse. So you have to try to remain calm. And if you can be calm in that situation, it's a superpower. You immediately level the playing field. As the attacker tries to ambush you, the whole point of the ambush is to get you to physically react or emotionally react. That's the whole point. And thereby, if you react and you go start swearing at them or stomp your feet or do the thing that that's the reason why they're going to ambush you. You do that, they win, because that was the whole point of the ambush, is ruin your reputation and make you stomp out. And so here's the trick. You got to pause for 6 seconds.
Ooh.
That's 6 seconds. Not that long.
Nope.
Is it? I just counted in my head. But it's been studied. There's psychological studies. A book called Never Split the Difference. Uncommon Communicator is a good podcast too, but Never Split the Difference. Just having that 6-second pause takes all of the air out of the ambusher's tires. You have to remain calm too, and it's super hard. It's so hard, but it has a profound impact on human conflict. 2, you got to set boundaries tactfully, and tactfully is call out the ambush behavior and set an appropriate meeting time and place for the meeting. Just call them out. But you have to do it calmly. Be like, hey, I have a meeting right now. I haven't started my day. You didn't follow the proper communication methods that I set for myself and everybody that I communicate with. So here's how it works. Please look at my calendar, find an open time. Let's have this conversation for real when we can both do it calmly. And it could be 10 minutes from now, it could be an hour from now. Let's go take a walk. Let's go look at the situation. Put some distance in between that attack and yourself, and set some boundaries around yourself. So this is the emotional, swift reaction force.
I like that.
Right? So you got to pump the brakes on the situation, but you have to do it very tactfully. If you come off and you start screaming and yelling, you're lost. You lost. You got to set some boundaries around yourself, and that's hard to do, but usually people will comply to it unless they're a complete bully. In that situation, just walk away. 3, be confident, not apologetic. Once you've calmed the situation, you've set some boundaries, confidence comes in. Be like, thank you for your feedback. And don't try to get back. There's no get backs here. If you can, take enough time to write down the criticism on a whiteboard. Put those nasty words in physical form. A whiteboard, you want to kill a nasty situation, make it visual. If there's no whiteboard around you and it's like a physical thing, be like, let's go physically walk and look at it. And 1, it changes the tempo of the conversation because you actually have to physically move. And two, it helps you collect your thoughts. If you're being ambushed, but you got to do it like Cool Cat. You got to have a late night DJ voice. I don't have one. And four, once you've set boundaries and you're not being apologetic, now it's time to challenge untrue or exaggerated accusations.
Yeah.
So this is why you got to start writing stuff on the wall or go physically. It's like, hey, what's the situation between you and Brad? Brad's not here right now. Let's grab Brad, bring him into this conversation right now. Be like, hey, let's not do this. He said stuff. Let's actually have a three-way conversation about it.
Yep.
Turn on a cell phone. They have this magical device that's called a speaker or a Teams or whatever. We're all basically reachable these days. And then challenge those exaggerated accusations. If you're being gaslit, someone is like trying to make you feel crazy. As you're challenging these accusations, you answer who, what, where, when, how many for every statement. And usually you'll find in one of those, they can't answer one of those because they made some wild assumption and be like, you know what? No, I've already had this agreement with this person and we're actually going to do it next Thursday. And that's what we're going to stick to because that works for the whole plan. I'm sorry you didn't understand that because I didn't tell you, but I'm telling you now. So you're starting to mend the relationship by challenging their false assumptions. Again, you have to do this in very calm character. And how do you do that? Go to step 5, and that's using assertive I and not you ever using you or their name or somebody else's name. Because what that does is say, you told me that I can make my own hours and you told me that blah, 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 blah. It's just like, oh, just throwing gas on the fire when you do that, because all of a sudden, if someone doesn't like confrontation, they're scared of that. And now it's now in their face. Now they'll double down on the frontal assault because they're committed. They're committed to that frontal assault. You can't maneuver away from that once you're committed to that assault. So they'll double down on that. And then sometimes this is how we turn into physical blows. Because when you get into a completely situation where you have no way out, the only way out is you use violence, right? So the other party will automatically become defensive if you're using you. So if you're using I, you're taking those blows, but you're being assertive about it. And you always use I. And then the 6th step, and probably the most important step, is listen. With your ears. Listen actively. And listening actively means you have to turn your body and face the person so both ears can hear equally, and then it comes at you. And then 2, your body language expresses if I'm open and I don't have my mitts up, I'm open to having a conversation. And that's why when you're trying to diffuse the situation, if you have to have that conversation right immediately, when you write the words down, one, if it's like super aggressive, they will tone themselves down because it has this psychological thing where like super aggressive words and they can see it. It diffuses it that way. And 2, it helps you listen because it's like, this is what I understand the situation. That boom, 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 these 5 things. Is this the entirety of the problem? Because let's go through these one at a time. And you might hear what your colleague is saying, but are you actually listening to them? Or are you waiting for your time to speak? And people's minds often wander. I'm all over the place. So I have to actually write stuff down. And especially if you're getting ambushed in a group setting, take meticulous notes because they want you to be shocked and not write anything down. So it's all hearsay. But if you can actually write down what you heard and then what you were feeling when you have that follow-up conversation, it can be more real. And then you can get past that. So that's the gist of chapter 17 there. What do you think about ambush?
You know, I love that you brought, 1, labeled the ambush techniques, 2, gave some remedies to it, right? Because it happens all the time. And I would add that if these situations happen with any like frequency, you may need to be thinking about changing places, changing bosses, changing companies, right? Because I mean, I can remember being on teams where that was the behavior and it was the normal operating procedure to behave that way. And it was not a fun place to be. Then all of a sudden I found myself exerting all kinds of energy to protect myself from ambushes instead of doing my damn job, right? Like, fact of the matter was, these people are going to be ambushing me no matter what. Like, the way they got ahead was on top of other people's backs. I need to be somewhere else. Luckily, the leadership changed, and that whole thing, like, just as soon as the leadership changed, that all that stuff went
there's
away.
No value in that. So the whole point of Hilton ambushing Alex in that meeting was to get his freaking order expedited. He's got some sub assemblies.
Yes, for his BFF somewhere.
And Alex does do himself a favor. He's like, listen, Hilton Smythe's doing the name drop technique. He's like, Bill Peach, the CEO, wants this done. He's like, I have a relationship with Bill Peach, by the way, Mr. Smythe. Don't name drop on me. So they're both at this crossroads. So they hang up the phone and discuss. And at the end of that conversation, Hilton goes, maybe you ought to read your mail. He knew. So not only is like he's trying to get his order expedited, he's also got this other ambush waiting for him in an envelope, another envelope, getting nailed left and right. And he gets the memo. Well, first thing he does, he's like, all right, I got to get this guy Smythe off my back. Goes talk to Bob, the floor manager. He's like, hey, get the expediters on this Hilton Smythe thing. He's like, what about this thing about Herbie? Like, what is this? They haven't discussed this yet, but he's like, okay, back to life, back to reality. So he's got to go back to work, even though he's holding this solid gold that he learned on a Boy Scout hike.
Yes.
He's got to grit his teeth and be like, you know what? That's got to wait. We got to get this thing ordered. Get my button ringer. And then it's like, oh, crap. What's in the memo? What's in the box? So the memo, it pulls it out. It's an announcement. So this would be an 80s version of email blasts.
Right.
It's an announcement that he named Smith to a newly created position of Division Productivity Manager. The appointment is effective at the end of this week. Basically, all the general managers of plants now report to Hilton Smythe. It's rearranged the organizational structure. And guess what? Hilton has operational control of how every plant is run. And it's according to the numbers, right? According to productivity numbers, only productivity numbers, only based on productivity, only based on individual workstations. And he's like, oh God, whatever chance I had to make some new arrangements, go find Herbie, go take the skillet out of his backpack, whatever chance I had, it's going to be so much harder. This guy who name drops, uses ambushes, he's now in charge. And you know what? That happens. The lesson here is whatever. I'll take care of your issue, and I'm going to work harder to go find
Make
Herbie.
this better.
And in that moment, even though it's harder, and even though you're probably going to get busted, you're probably going to get in trouble now. But being brave, being courageous, being assertive, being a leader, being independent, those are masculine traits. So we go back to like, that's where we want our hero Alex to go. And he gets his crew. He starts to build a crew, and he's got some smart people that work with him. We already know Lou, the accountant. He's got the financials on lock. Bob, right? Operational leader out on the floor. It's like superintendent. Works with all the workstations. Stacy's the head lead expediter who understands how the plant operates, but also understands productivity and what things are. So she's got the numbers, and she's probably classically trained. She probably has like a master's in productivity, TQM. And you got Ralph Nakamura, and he's got the data. He's got the access to the mainframe computer. So now we almost have all of the elements that we can study our operation with. This crack team of misfits. Guess what he does? Alex goes and he gets a big pad of paper and he starts drawing diagrams on the wall. And at this moment, they're like, okay, one, we got a goal. We got to ship out these parts to another plant for Hilton Smythe. Two, we got to go find Herbie. And so we're like, Stacy, you know all the optimization stuff. Go find a machine that's not optimum. Bob, go find Herbie. So he explains the hike, and then like Lou, Cool Hand Lou, He's like, nah, I don't buy this. I don't buy this. And this, my friends, is why we need diversity. You have to have diverse sets of thought, diverse, and people being like, I'm not buying into this BS, man. Just because you went on some hike, I don't know what chemicals that you ingested on your camping trip. He's like, it's just that, well, you said you figured this out by watching a bunch of kids hiking. Like, always naysaying, Lou. In fact, you have to have that. And the reason why, because not everybody's going to buy into your situation. And so instead of being like, nah, this is my way or the highway, which probably Alex could have done. But the reason why they set it up with him getting waylaid by Hilton Smythe, he's like, I'm not going to repeat that with Lou. I could pull rank and be like, Lou, this is what we're doing. This is the new way. Either you like it or it's too bad. Go look, there's a letter in your inbox, by the way. So you can take it up with Hilton. It's not my fault. So he doesn't. He stops that cycle of psychological damage, because that's what it is. And he's like, I got an idea. These robots, they got statistical fluctuations. It's one of the reasons why we got the dang robots, so we can have consistency, because it doesn't sleep. It don't need food. It just needs electricity and grease and oil. So then Lou's like, Bob, you got a point there. So it's like, and so they're writing stuff. They're drawing out diagrams on the wall. And Alex is writing like constraint, dependent events, statistical fluctuations. They start mapping the plant. They start mapping it out, because when you draw that line, that shows logic of dependent events. Why do you think that is so important, to do the visual thing?
So there's two reasons for me. One is when we visualize it and put it out in front of us, somebody in that group of misfits has direct responsibility of that situation. And if we're talking about the situation, like you and I right now, we're on camera and I'm saying, hey, that thing that you're doing, I'm pointing at you. And so the feeling is that you're the problem. But when we take it out of our head and put it up on the wall, you're not the problem. The problem is we're attacking the problem together now, side by side, able to see that. The other thing is now we can both verify that we're talking about the same damn thing. Like, nope, that's not where it is. It's 2 steps forward. No, it's a step and a half back, whatever that situation is. But because it's visualized now, we are working towards gaining agreement on the problem. That thinking right there, Mr. David Verbal, through many coaching sessions, helped me understand. He's like, Jesse, a plan without agreement is a wish. What you need to do is get agreement on the problem first. Like, oh man, you want me to work to solve this problem? I just wanted to give a solution. But visualizing is one of those methods to help gain agreement on the problem and make sure that we're isolating the problem as it is out in the workspace, not within the individual.
Yeah. And it takes the individual almost out of it. But the whole point of that is write the steps out. And if you're in a group setting, if someone doesn't buy that step happens after this step, they can see it and understand it, and they can interject, be like, no, there's actually an intermediate step that actually happens here. Yeah. Then that's their opportunity to explain it. And if that's correct, if that proves that, yeah, you're right. And now I'm going to draw that instead of from A to B, it's going to go from A to A.2, then to B. So I'm going to change my logic. So they do that. They draw out basic steps of their facility. He wrote constraint, dependent events, statistical fluctuations. And the team, they're like, I think it's the robot, the NCX-10. And they're like, think about it. The parts, they have to pass through the robot. The robot can only handle 25 parts per batch. And then it goes through and mills it. I imagine it's like a 80s style CNC mill. Can't do 26, but if you do 24, you're not meeting the capacity. I'm going to get busted by Hilton. I'm running it less than 100% capacity. So if you only run 24, then one empty slot you don't run. So you're actually going to be slower than what that thing needs. Here's the thing. Here's what they realize, that robot, the setup piece, that's not by another robot. That's by a human being, and it's by a set of human beings. So the setup is done by human beings who take breaks and work shifts. The other thing is that the parts that arrive in front of the machine, they don't come in sets of 25 always.
Yep.
Sometimes it comes in 12. Sometimes
Yep.
it comes in 28. So it's like, what do we run? We run a batch of 12 and
Let's
we run
just wait
half
for the
batches,
next
or we
batch.
run a 25 and then a 6 or what? Like, what are we doing here? So it's, you have all this fluctuation, all this variance, and all this variance is caused because the entire system is not set up to give that machine what they assume is the bottleneck, because it's not optimized. It's not giving that machine what it needs every single time. So that's what they realized. They're like, oh, damn. This thing that Bill Peach is all hot and bothered about, marketing people are all over it. It's in all these trade magazines that like, it's got the NCX10, right? They're like, oh, damn. Like now this situation went from really bad to way worse because we're going to have to optimize the robot. The thing that's entire purpose was to make the plant more productive. It's freaking Herbie. So the only thing that it can do is make things worse. That's the only thing it can do. If nothing else is fixed, the only thing that robot will do is continuously make stuff worse. And then even worse, a dang thing will break.
Yes. And then you're totally shut down.
If you've ever done anything with a drill rig, drilling into the earth, there's one constancy: it will break, because drilling into the earth is incredibly rough on machines, steel, carbide, and diesel, and it will break. And usually there's not enough money in the budget to have two. So the thing about a drill rig, just like the robot, you gotta paint it. You gotta take some of the load off of it to make sure that you don't run that thing so ragged it's gonna blow up, and then your whole drilling operation slows down, or it stops.
So I got a story about the drill rig situation. We were pursuing this project that was like crazy timeline. 24-hour shifts for, whatever it was, 6 or 7 months. It was a data center. And the rub, so we stopped calling it pull plan because the GC didn't we don't believe in that lean junk. It's like, okay, can we at least map out this process, the underground installation from drilling to roughing to pouring concrete? Let's just look at those steps, because we knew that we would not be able to meet the schedule time that was dictated to us. Like, we can't do that. And they like, well, you have to, you signed up for it. I'm like, okay, we did sign up for it. I didn't sign it, but I'm telling you, we're going to start out of the gate bad. So we got into it. They agreed to map the process out. And I'm like, look, the fact is these drill rigs will break. There's a lot of downtime. And I recognize that my schedule time, I have enough time to do my job. If the drill rigs do not break, and they always do. Like, we all know this. So the sequence is not going to work. You're going to compress me, and I know I can't deliver that because of inspections. Like, the thing was, the frequency and the response time of inspections was going to delay or impact, right? It was a day and a day and a day and a day and a day, and it took us 4 or 5 days out and like train wreck. I said, what if we go in there and rock saw all of our ditches and backfill them? And then they come in and start doing their drilling. And like, well, why would you do that? I'm like, because that's where I'm going to get held up. If they're busted, I can't dig. And my machinery to dig is way bigger. There's not enough space. We're just going to have a whole lot of traffic. If I can get in there and saw cut all of my ditches and backfill them, and they break down, I can get a little mini excavator. I can get a little termite baby or hand dig the damn ditch, because now it's powder, and keep going with my roughing. And they're like, well, you're going to be responsible. Like, it was like, I'll rent steel plates to cover the ditches. Like, whatever. They're not going to slow me down if you let us do this. And they did. And oh my God, it was a crazy idea, but it was glorious at the end of it, because guess what? The stupid drill rig broke down a few times. They had to get one in.
Yeah. Oh, it's a big deal. The drillers of the world, like, we salute you. Dude.
Poor guys.
That's some serious work. Our society is sitting on their work.
Absolutely.
A lot of it. If you've crossed a bridge, if you've ever slept in this hotel I have, it's sitting upon something that was drilled into the ground, and it's not most appreciated work. That's a great story, because it links perfectly with, there's a little bet. So Alex, he's like, I got Smythe, he's up my butt. All right, we got to get these 200 sub-assemblies out. This robot can only do 25 parts at a time. It's afternoon. This thing is 4 hours. We got to get these parts on a truck and off. So we got to get cracking. So you guys make 100 units and the robot make 100 units, right? But they have to give the robot parts, right? That's the whole point. So it's like, who's going to win? Hey, the robot needs 25 parts an hour. Can you hit that? And they're like, dude, we got this.
Yep.
We got it. He bets him $10. We don't get this order shipped out. He's like, you're betting against your own demise? Bob, that's what he bets Bob. He's like, $10. Not a big sum of money, maybe a little more in the 80s, but he's like, I bet you $10 we don't ship this order. But he calls Smythe. He's like, hey, we're going to get this order out. He's like, you got it. So he's like, now the heat's on and they got to get it out. So he asked one of Pete's people, he says, keep track of your production every hour and keep it on this. Just make a note and then I'll come around and I'll see our progress. So the first hour, and in the book, it's on page 132, but the first hour between noon and 1, Pete's guys get team parts.
Yep.
It's good. I mean, they're on it. They're not worried because they're like, hey, we'll just ramp it up. We'll just start hitting it. So the first hour, they give the machine 19 parts. The machine and the guys are going now. Second hour, Pete's crew, 21 parts. It was an improvement from the previous hour. So at this point, they're like, guys, we're behind. We're not going to make it. But this time, Bob's like, oh, we're going to beat this robots, but we're going to crush them. The robot, I guarantee you, is going to be the constraint. I guarantee you the robot is the constraint. They mapped it out. Bob comes over. Third hour. So at this point, they're only 10 behind, which is pretty close. Third hour, they crush it, 28. They cut it. They're only 7 pieces behind. But at this time, the robot has only processed a 19 batch. The second batch was 21. But it's still behind by 10. So right now it's 68 parts to 40. Third hour. So they crushed it between 3 and 4, 32. Yeah, they've gotten efficiency. And now they're ahead. They hit 100. Yeah. Nailed it. They saw the finish line. But guys, last hour, if we hit 32, we beat the machine.
Yes.
They give the 32, 4 o'clock, 100. Bob's like, pay up, bro. And the machine still's got 1 more hour to run, but it's 10 behind.
Yeah.
It's 10 behind, and it can only do 25. Like, literally, they see the constraint in front of their eyes. They can't hurry the machine. There's 10 units sitting in front of this machine. Inventory.
Yes, that's exactly where I was at.
The inventory showed up and cluttered in front of the Herbie, the NCX-10, and literally they're like, yeah, there's no point in tell the truck to go. They're like, do you want to take the half order? And like, no, I'll tell Hilton that he'll have the dang thing in the first truck out in the morning. Like, whatever. He got his order, right? But that proved that the NCX-10 was Herbie, but they were all uncomfortable and squishy about it because this is the big machine. This thing has high precedence, high pecking order. But the moral there of 18, it's like, hey, they need to, one, anticipate that their plan of hitting it on the dot exactly at the right time. This thing does 25 an hour. We got 4 hours. That's 100 units. That's the order. We got it. Like, we got it. But the first hour, it gets 19. It was already done. So if you're doing this with tact, first hour 19, there's a flag. Somebody pulls an andon. Probably when they delivered those 19 units. That didn't fulfill my Kanban. Andon, let me explain, is a signal that says, hey, there's some kind of an issue. So if you're working to tact, meaning like if we're working to 25 parts an hour and I need 25 parts an hour for me to be fully optimized and I get 19, I'm going to raise a flag right there. So if we're working on assumptions or historical data being like, hey, this thing does 25 an hour, if we just work the dang thing harder, if we're hopeful or have the truck wait later, delay the truck, and that he's got to go deliver and then go home. Like, now you're screwing around with people's lives. If we start creating little micro delays, we have to raise those flags right then and there. So I have a story that when this happened, that's why I picked this photograph behind me. This is a vertical building. It's a 28 floor building in San Francisco. It's on 2nd and Howard. It's the headquarters of LinkedIn, if you're into that kind of thing. But you'll see behind me, this is Herbie. Let me introduce you. This guy and this guy, they are iron workers. Remember I was telling the story about we figured out a cycle time for welding and concrete. Like we figured out that sequence. We did not, in that sequence, in that planning, we failed to find Herbie. This is probably 200 plus feet in the air right here. The problem with building in high places is you need to access them, and you can't just levitate. We can access them from a hoist, and it's not legal either. But the problem with accessing with a mechanical device is if that breaks, then your access is ruined. And if someone gets seriously hurt or injured or has a medical condition or just wants to go home, traditionally, we would build some kind of a job-built ladder here. You've probably gone up and down those a million times.
Oh, yeah.
Right. But we were like, we don't want to use ladders. Why don't we use these steel stairs? And they're not the kind you fill with concrete. They're just pan stairs. So they're as soon as you install them and put a handrail up,
ready to go.
They're stairs. So Herbie was not the stairs themselves being delivered. It was the time it takes to get them up there, get them aligned, get them welded, get things in place. It's not the greatest work. I mean, you see these two gentlemen here, they're being tied off. You're not fully able to move freely. So you move slower than if you weren't encumbered with that. The problem is they don't have multiple crews. It's one crew that installs the stairs. They do the erection, they do the bolting, and they do the welding, and they do the cables, and they release them to other workers. Plus they have to get all their inspections. So it's not like we can just add more Herbies.
Nope.
We can't add more any iron workers, because if we add more iron workers on these sets of stairs, that will rain welding slag down upon themselves. Just like we added some netting to catch the slag from the structural steel welds. Same thing here. So that's dangerous. That can't be the solution. So what was the solution? We had to figure that out. We had to accept that, yes, our limitation of continuously growing the structure higher was not the hoist, not the crane. That was our first assumption in my first story. That only worked until we ran out of stairs. And the reason why we ran out of stairs was because this opening, they needed the landing to be filled with concrete because they needed to get it set right. And we're like, I don't know if that's the right assumption. Is that the right thing? And then the second assumption was, well, you can't have the stairs sitting on the slab on metal deck like that's around here until we pour the concrete. Like, it's in the dang way. This is the concrete guys telling me. And this is once we realized the stairs was the constraint. And we didn't blame the stair people. Great workers. They were highly productive. They're very skilled. They did a great job on this project. I took this photo studying them. I was actually like trying to understand the steps and doing the same thing I did with the iron workers and the concrete crews and all the MEP trades that did all their inserts. Now I was like, we have to change the way we looked, and we had to accept that and not blame Olson. We didn't blame them at all. In fact, we were like, let's figure this out. So the first thing was like, we need to resolve this issue with delivering the stairs. So that's a manufacturing problem. I got to call Olson's shop and be like, hey, where's our stairs at? And they're like, they're all here lined up. Here's a photo, bro. So I'm like, okay, that's not a problem. It's a delivery issue now. Okay, that's mine. I can't control this delivery issue. So the second problem was, hey, when the stairs are laying on the deck, it's in the way of the concrete finishing. And then we got to send the concrete crew back. Like, that's just a bad idea. So you know what the solution that we came up with? I don't know if you can see it in this device, but they have this thing. It's a chain fall. This chain fall device, if you use several of them, you can suspend during a concrete pour safely in the air up high where you're placing the concrete.
Nice.
And hold it in that place. And we secured it. We didn't just use the chain fall. We used a couple methods, and we made sure it was safe and wasn't falling. And no one went under it, but we had to finish under it. But it was secured off, and it was suspended from the air. That removed that issue. It removed the issue of, hey, it's access. Now, once the concrete is placed And again, it's not hanging over the concrete. It's just hanging over where the stair goes. You lower this piece down, and then there's another section where this gentleman's standing. The other section is above him that's being lowered from the floor above, and that'll go fit in this section right here. And that's how stairs are erected. And we figured that out about halfway through. We resolved another Herbie. They're starting to put a hand on Herbie's back. The new Herbie, concrete. And I'll save that story for the next time. I guess you're a marathon runner.
Yeah.
So sometimes it helps if you're getting gassed, if you have somebody who's running at the same pace. So if you have someone in this instance where you have a productivity, they're slow and now they picked back up and they just little tap on the back, being like, hey, Olson, we're going to catch up. We caught up and now we're giving everyone access. Very safed off. They got cables. Like, it's way better access than any kind of job built ladder. I don't care how fancy it is with gates. Sit out. If you can't do this, do scaffolding stairs. As a trade worker, you can appreciate that you can, yes, you can use the hoist to get up to the floor, but if you need to work from floor to floor, it's just really nice to just shoot down the stairs. Plus, it's a means of egress in the event of an emergency, and it's just better on overall morale. Go back to Dr. Goldratt. It can't exceed demand. That capacity, it should always meet the demand. And he actually gives, there's 9 more rules. They're called bottleneck rules, but we'll talk about that next time, chapter 19. But he basically says, if you have a known capacity, we do a floor based upon our productivity rates, based upon a whole bunch of historical data, based upon our weekly work plan that we sign off and commit to every single week. We know pretty predictably where we're going to be from week to week. And now we find issues, and then we start resolving those issues. Your capacity will now increase. Trick is don't rest. Go look for Herbie. He's going to be around.
Herbie's out there for sure.
Just had different hard hats.
Yes.
And the new Herbie will be, spoiler alert, it will be concrete fill on metal deck. Also amazing crew. Now they saw it. They're like,
they see it. They're experiencing it.
All of this stuff. This has an organizing effect on a whole organization of people. It doesn't matter what trade you're at. When you start to see this organization start to happen, and maybe you've experienced this, you start to be like, these guys got it.
Yes.
These guys are getting it. And it wasn't magic.
Nope.
We were figuring this out on our own. We did have some third-party help. I will say we did. There might have been some UC Berkeley influence coming in, but that was later. That was actually later. This initial optimization we figured out with Last Planner system. Wasn't perfect, wasn't by the book at all. That added with optimization, meaning when I was taking this photo, we would actually watch production happen and we'd compare notes. And based upon the notes, we would make decisions.
Yes.
Then go back and look at the P6 schedule. That was part of the decision-making process. I'm not saying we threw the thing out, but we definitely used this data. That was the means to make the update. We didn't sit there and have to explain our way around the situation. We still weren't like high-fiving each other about getting ahead on the schedule. We were high-fiving each other because the job was getting easier.
Yes.
We were having fun and getting along, and it wasn't perfect. I'm not going to say this is like hunky-dory and there was rainbows on the other side of mission, but we got along really well. And how do I know that? Because I still feel very strongly for the people that on that project that work there, and including this Olson Steel stair crew. Man, they just knocked it out. They were just they're great, super safe. And when they were Herbie, we didn't blame them. We didn't send them delay letters. We did do some due diligence. We called their fab and said, hey, what's this situation on the fabrication? And then once we got past that situation, based on a really great relationship that we had, it was like, okay, let's go find a solution. And the solution was right in front of our face. And all those ideas came from conversations just like the misfit crew. Even in the face of getting yelled at by their boss, even with the home issues that he's got faced with, he had every right to just be with his coworkers, with his boss. But he said, I'm going to work on that. But right now, the situation says, let's get Hilton Splice order out, because that's the situation. But also, let's simulate our theory in the meantime, so we can do both. We're going to get Hilton's order out on time or way better than we've ever performed. So
Yes.
we'll look good there. And then 2, we're also going to learn from this process, this theory of constraints that we're trying to figure out. And we got to go find a Herbie. And we assume the Herbie is the NCX-10 robot. And then we got the data guy there crunching the numbers, being like, hey, you're not going to make it. And here's why.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden they're like, now they're faced with the brutal facts. And they're like, damn, this has more weight to it. So I'm going to leave it at that.
Yes. Love it.
But has that ever happened to you, having the organizational effect from other trades, like seeping into your own work?
Totally. I like the way you mentioned the morale. And that's kind of the most significant experience I've had of where we're working. And, I was totally local optimization for a very long time. And we're smoking everybody. And all of a sudden I could see like, these dudes are catching up. And I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. But because of the way the morale was that way, the GC, the superintendent on that project, was very good about, hey, this is what's happening. These guys are getting ahead. What are you going to do? They're catching up to you. What can we do? It was never dictatorial. He would share his observations about what was going on and figure like, hey, Jess, you're working a bunch of overtime. I'm going to ask you to stop because you're creating problems and you don't need to work all this overtime. And like, yeah, but we got to get done. And my guys want overtime and, whatever. And then you find like, Jesse, no, you need to stop. I'm not approving your overtime. I am not going to be here Saturday. You're not going to be here past 3:30 because you're getting too far ahead. So he would do things. And I'm like, man, why are you doing that? And the guys were like, Jess, that's fine. Like we won a weekend. And all of a sudden I could see, okay, now I need to amp it up. I need to catch up or we need to switch some things. The significant thing he did and what you've described that you did was he never told me how many people I needed to have or like any of that. What he did was he said, hey, man, I've been watching. I can see this is what's happening over here with the framers. We got the mezzanine going up. What's your plan there? I see y'all struggling. What if you tried this so that we can get the air handler units and pieces, get them on it, all this, just helping us problem solve. And that's like the one time. There might be 2 other times in my career. And the difference was he never said you need more people. What he did was we always approached how we were doing the work. How are you going to do that? How is what you're doing affecting everything? At that point in my thinking, it wasn't clear to me. He was just magical, right? The way he operated. But looking back, it was like, that's what he was doing. And it was very different than the traditional style of you need more people. You need more people and you need to work more hours, because that was always the only answer. And now I understand, like, oh, okay, so you're going to make us throw more people and work more hours when really what that means is we're going to do more waste faster. Let's look at the process. Let's adjust the process. Like, yeah, I agree we should add more people, but let's look at all these bottlenecks that we have and let's do something about those before we add the damn people. And that's a hard thing. People get excited, right? They learn Last Planner, they get introduced to Lean, and they think it's just going to happen. Like, no, it takes study and observation and experimentation to get there. And clearly you understood that.
No, we did that. We're not hitting our numbers that we're committing to. What's up with that? What's up with that question? It's not a closed question. You are stair installer foreman are behind. You need to work every Saturday and Sunday and possibly add another shift. But in lieu of that, it sounds like you had a very similar conversation, and it's universal. It happened probably at the same time in Texas. I'm in California. We're having the same conversation, and really that's how it works. Take notes, keep score, be open and honest about it. And then when you see a problem, don't blame the crew working. They're working hard. They're skilled craftspeople. It's not their problem. It's Thomas's problem in this thing. And guess what? I was like, okay, now I'm gonna check my ego and I'm gonna be like, what's the solution out of this? And I couldn't do it by myself.
No.
I had to call Jay at the shop. I had to talk to the foreman and be like, hey, what's your idea on this? I had to go talk to the concrete crew, get their permission because, hey, there's going to be a stair suspended over an opening. Are you okay with this? I had to get permission from our safety department to do that. They added all kinds of stuff to make sure that thing's going to be secured. Like I got all that squared away. We did an inspection on it. We did a whole bunch of validation on it. We had a couple contingency plans like, hey, what happens if the stairs get behind? So we had these plans in place just in case we got out of sequence. And if you're Jason Stroder, if you're planning that tight, this is where you add in those time buffers. And then when you need the contingency plan, you burn a time buffer. That way you don't get out attacked. I was learning that the hard way firsthand in lieu of learning it in a book, but I was also reading chapter 18 when I took this photograph, probably very close in time. I found that, hey, this is a situation that it's in our power to resolve. Yes. In fact, this is the kind of problem solving that is looked at as like super positive. This is what we want people to think. You can't teach that. You can't. You can only show people the way. And I found that this is the way. And I really wanted to share that with the people listening, that at this moment and in this time when I took this photograph and when I read this chapter, had these conversations, made some decisions, I was in a position of authority, so I could actually make these decisions too. That's another key factor.
That's key, so key.
The structural area superintendent in charge of this area could only bring this up to me, and I wasn't even fully agency. Like I had to get permission from beyond me to do this kind of stuff. But we figured it out. We made it happen, and we were better for it. But there was always a Lou, cool hand Lou. Being like, instead of just on the chain fall, can we actually have like a physical restraint that doesn't reverse? Yeah. Let me go talk to the crew and be like, and then there's other things. And we came up with a plan. We went out and executed that plan. This new concept. Have you heard of this? It's called the OODA loop.
I have heard of it. Yes.
The OODA loop. It comes from the Air Force. So aim high. It's a Colonel John Boyd. And it's very important because in an Air Force situation, especially in an aircraft, you have to make super fast decisions almost instantly and be trained for that, right? So OODA, O-O-D-A, the first O is observation. You have to observe. You have to understand the unfolding circumstances. You have to understand the outside information. You have to understand what's happening in your environment. The only way to do that is observe. Second thing is orient. So I got to go talk to the fab shop. I got to talk to the concrete crew. I have to talk to the steel erectors. I have to talk to the stair crew. I got to talk to my safety department. I got to talk to a project manager. I got to talk to the general super. I got to talk to the ops manager. I have to get all of this clearance to get stuff oriented and be like, okay, we got this plan. These are the steps. What's wrong with the plan? And then you decide. Once you have that kind of packaged together, you make a decision, and that decision does a couple things. You can either move forward and say, yeah, go, to feedback, back to either your orientation, or you go back. You got to go back and observe more. You get some kind of feedback, and so it's a loop. And that decision, you only move to act. The A, so O-O-D-A. When you move to act, you have to make a decision. And that decision is based upon how you oriented, and how you oriented it is on your observation. So they train in this loop. And now I try to bring that into every situation. Observe, orient, decide, feedback. If the decision is no, right? It's never just no, it's no, but, and then act immediately. Immediately act. There's no waiting. There's no observe, orient, hesitate, right? There's no observe, get scared, run away. So if you're in a very serious situation, OODA loop, it's just a little mind trick, but you can actually follow these steps in any process, any decision-making process. So I'm going to stop with that. But what's your thoughts on this chapter?
Lots of good nuggets, and especially your experience and like the OODA loop. Observe, orient, decide, act. I'm usually decide, act, and then like, oh crap, I should have observed a little bit. So that gets me in trouble. But my observation of working with a lot of people in our industry is they never get to decide and act. They're observing and orienting and complaining the whole time. Even worse, they're observing from the trailer. Sorry, bro. That's not what we mean. Get out there and get boots and see what the hell's actually happening. Because if you're just asking people to report the situation, and Adam Hoots, my interview with him, he shares this example a lot. When he was doing Last Planner, he was having a problem. He couldn't understand what the hell was going on between the plumber and the framer. And it was frustrating him until he went to see and he's like, oh, because if we count, and I've done this, if I'm dependent on people's report of the situation, there's bias in the report. And if I'm making a decision on that, like, it's not going to be the best decision. I've got to go and see it for myself to say, okay, now I understand what you're saying and what you're saying. And here's the relationship. What if we do X, Y, Z, right? That's the orientation part. Again, I think the one thing people take away from this little banter is don't observe from the trailer. Go out there, see it, decide, and act. There's another book by Annie Duke, Thinking in Bets. Really good book. And it talks about the difference or dynamic between making the rightest decision based on all the information you had in hand. That's a good thing. That does not guarantee an outcome. And if the outcome is not in your favor, it's not because you made a bad decision. It's because the outcome's an outcome. And often those people that get stuck in the observe and orient, they're trying to mitigate every single risk to guarantee a particular outcome, but life. So the outcome is not always going to be perfect. So decide and act and then repeat. That's why it's OODA loop.
Thank you that's a great assessment of it. And that's kind of the piece that I wanted to say, and you highlighted it. When you get to decide, you have to have agency to make a decision. And everybody's like, you got to take ownership of all this stuff. Like, you don't have ownership of everything, every aspect of everything. But you can bring this orientation, is if you can take ownership of that and say, I've exhausted every remedy. I've packaged this whole thing up. I can no longer elevate this constraint any longer. I have to elevate it beyond my agency, beyond my roles and responsibilities. And from there, the ownership piece for you and me is if the feedback is no, you have to accept that. Because oftentimes the feedback will be no. And sometimes there's good reasons for the no. Sometimes people are just like, go away. Your problem isn't big enough for me. But don't fret on that. Go back to observe some more. Perhaps your observation was flawed, or the way that you packaged your issue and the way you elevated it wasn't at the right time. The mood wasn't right. Somebody was annoyed and said, get out of here, Thomas, for the 50,000th time today. So that orientation piece, when you feed it forward into your decision, that's got to be pretty complete. And you have to consider culture, right? You have to consider how it's going to be analyzed. And you have to do this rapidly. So if your plan is incomplete, oftentimes you'll get the feedback of no. What I learned in this instance, that planning, that orientation part is sometimes exhausting. And sometimes you're not completely successful on the first try, but try again. Don't be crushed, because the benefit is build morale, build relationship, build trust. People are generally happy at work. And what that builds upon is people's mental state, their care for each other. That just has such a resounding effect. I'm going to leave it at that.
Did I not tell you? I think it's the combination of Thomas's intellect and flexibility to share the stage with me, and his like real concern for humans, like for people. He really, really cares. That comes through every time I talk to him. He and I, we both operated differently years ago, and we have seen the light. Y'all got to hit up Thomas. If y'all are on the LinkedIn, you need to follow him. That dude's got it going on. And time for the L&M family member shout out. We got some feedback. We received a review on the Apple thing. Boom, boom, boom. LF team. LF team says, Jesse is one of a kind leader who understands the work that is done every day on the job site. Where he differs from others is heart for people. There's no other leader that values others quite like this guy. Be ready to be challenged. and to be motivated to grow in each podcast. I'm sorry, LF team. I giggle a little bit because it's kind of uncomfortable to read that kind of stuff about me. I really appreciate that my heart comes through and that you're picking up on it. And particularly that you took the time to put such meaningful words into the app thing. And L&M family, I'm always grateful for all the feedback, your comments on the socials, the likes, the shares, the reposts. Aaron Gibson, you be reposting like crazy, bro. I love it. So y'all keep it going. End of the year's coming. Be kind to yourself. Take care of you. Take care of your people. Be cool. And we'll talk at you next time. Peace. Oh my goodness. You're either driving down the road or just so enthralled with this whole podcast that you went all the way down to the very, 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 very end of it. And we appreciate you. And we're going to take this as an indication of your dedication. So we got a little special request of you, a call to action, because everybody tells us that like you need to have a call to action. So here's the call to action. Be kind to yourself. Go out there and share a smile with someone. Peace.